All right. Episode 9. Tyler, how are you?
Almost the double digits. I'm doing well. Thank you. This is kind of quintessential swipe up this week where we didn't really have a topic as of this morning to peel back the curtain for everybody. But fortunately, Jordan and I, when we put our brains together, we can come up with some pretty good ideas. So I'm excited actually for this week. I always kind of forget when it's Thursday, and then you text me like, what should we do this week? I'm like,
Yep.
Oh, and I get the wheels turning. So I'm excited this week. We're going to be jumping into some of our old content, which is something I've done before with some other people. I think it's a really valuable exercise, and I'm sure I'll talk about it more. But I sort of love going either whether it's back into like years old content, which is stuff that we're going to be doing today. But then it's also really fun to look at stuff that you've done like in months past to see how you've evolved and what you can improve on, because I think that's a really important part in things that we both do, whether it be social media or content or whatever. So I'm excited.
Right. And I'm excited too, just because, I mean, I've only been doing this for a little over a year. So just to be able to look back at, how much I've grown in just that short time, it's pretty exciting.
For sure. All right. Who are we going to start with?
I can go.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So this is the first testimonial video I made for VSM. Get full screen. And so just a little backstory on this project, I guess. It was an offsite project, so not on VSM property. My first one, it was people I didn't know, and it was basically an interview. And I had no clue what to bring. I had one light and I think a crappy $15 lavalier mic and like a Rode Video Mic Pro, which is a great mic, but it didn't work. So as you can hear, can you get that audio, Ty?
Yep.
So like this intro sequence is pretty cool, I think.
Ooh, I like that.
But then just wait till you see that.
Met with a couple groups, and all of a sudden,
I mean, that's just not a great interview setup, if I'm being completely honest.
They're standing up, first of all.
And we were really impressed.
They're standing up. I didn't even use the light that I brought.
Renting our townhome.
There's like no depth in the background. That's something that's big for, I guess, when I shoot, interview videos now. I like something with depth in the background. So,
right.
One, it's a blurry background. Two, it gives you something more to look at than just a wall. But as you can hear, this is all in camera audio. Taken from the camera body.
Oh, you didn't use any external microphone?
I had the Rode mic plugged in. I said that'll be good, and it was plugged into the headphone jack and not the mic jack. So as you can see, this was,
I love about VSM.
I don't know exactly when I filmed this, but it was super early in my time with VSM when they just, took a chance on me.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't great. Just looking back, it's one of those things I would change a lot. But I mean, all in all, they got good feedback on this video. It was one of the best performing videos that we put out in terms of, client testimonial or client feedback. So that was great. But there's just so many things I would do different, man.
Yeah. I think it's I love the trial by fire like mindset that it seems like you and I both have, but the negative side of that is that you'll get stuff like this where you're like, oh my God, like what was I
100%.
doing? And you learn quickly, but unfortunately some stuff still exists out in the ether where you just look back at it and you're like,
right. And it was one of those things too where I was so anxious to do it. Just it was like something new for me, and I was like, I just wanted to almost get in and be done with it so I could get home and just edit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, looking back, I would change a lot. But okay, So that's the first one. Not great. Video performed decently well. Could have been a lot better.
Why do you think the video performed so well, even though it was still such a subpar?
That's a good question. I think
it work.
It was shared among the VSM network really well, like agents, mortgage advisors. They were all sharing it. And I think if you have that within a company, that helps videos. I mean, no matter what, because you got people that you know and trust that are sharing these videos with other people that they know and trust. And if you listen to it, we didn't listen to a whole lot of it, but I do think the what they said and the actual spoken content was good.
Yeah. And were they doing any video stuff before you had joined with them, or was what you were doing was the first of its kind at the company?
So they had a video guy who had left, I think, a couple months prior to me. And so I was, they were, I don't want to say desperate, but they were just like, we got to keep up the trend with videos. So let's get someone on here. And then I was one of the first guys to reach out to him. So
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pull up this other one real quick.
Okay.
This was my first big project with One Way Wireless. This is like a 2-day shoot. Then I actually went back and filmed more testimonials. But I'm still a big fan of this video, but there's some things
what it takes to be part of an elite group called Tower
First of all,
Technicians? Here
the
at One Way
voiceover.
Wireless Construction,
They had someone in-house do it, a worker, which is totally fine.
Your project manager and your foreman are very knowledgeable.
But looking back, I would pay the $50 on Fiverr just to hire a voiceover artist.
Safety equipment
Yeah.
for those who take the next steps with One Way.
We get them
And again,
familiar
I
with
had
the basics.
You can see they're
here,
finally wearing that
in the
lavalier
warehouse.
mic, because I wasn't going to make that same mistake I made with the testimonial.
Training, which is in the field.
But still, it's
Everything
$15.
from
The audio's
finding
just
the
not
towers,
great.
Learning how to text, pin, sweep,
On-screen
cyber
graphics,
testing.
they're fine.
There's a lot
They're
of
not
stuff that
exciting
goes
though.
into it.
I don't think
While you
that's
start
drawn
your
anyone's
warehouse,
attention.
you
Yeah.
really
And this was
learn
almost
and
like,
become
I think this was
proficient
before I knew
in the
about
field, working with the foreman
um,
on a daily basis.
like Motion Array, where you could
Class
just
training,
download
safety lessons, and
graphics and titles, or even Mojo, which I use now. So I was like doing all of those within Premiere Pro and like keyframing all the transitions, so it just took forever.
Than maybe the roof of your house.
But,
We'll teach you to climb higher.
The content's not bad. Like, I think
You don't even know what towers
pieced
were.
together pretty well.
I moved
I
my
think it
way
could have been
from
more exciting.
not
The
knowing
footage is
anything to
shaky.
where I'm at
And this
right
is
now.
before I knew about ND
A project
filters
manager
and
works, like I've
proper
made a lot of
shutter speed for
connections,
videos.
lot
I was
of,
shooting
lot of
probably
friends
all
that you
auto
know now.
at
It's
60
a
frames per
new
second,
industry
so it
to
could
be
slow down
Never
just a
thought
little
we could
bit.
do this kind of work,
Um,
be part of an industry that is
but yeah, they were big
constantly
fans.
growing. We can
The
build
client
you
was
to be an
big fans of
integral
this video,
part
so
of our
that,
family.
I mean, really, that's
It's a
all
new
that matters.
industry.
So,
Right.
Yeah, it's been
but again,
around for
there's just so many things I would
22
improve.
years, but it's still evolving.
Like with the interview
hasn't hit
setups,
its
you can
peak
see
yet.
with like this.
Uh,
I mean, how boring is that background? You know what I mean? Like,
He's sitting in a corner.
what was
Yeah.
I thinking?
Right. Yeah, that's funny. So this is after that first video that you showed. What were some things that you mentioned, like the lavalier microphone? What were some mistakes that you were like certain not to make again? And then what were some mistakes that it looks like you still maybe made?
Yep. So, like I just mentioned, obviously backdrop. I would put very little to no time into thinking about that. But what I did try to improve on with what I had was audio. So I had 2 mics this time. Would sync them up in post-production. And with this setup, I had 2. You can see, I don't know if you can see a couple of shots, but like this, I had 2 different camera angles for every single guy. And, if you're filming interview videos, that is huge for, splicing together. They stumble over a word, you can just cut to a new angle and it looks seamless.
Right.
So that's something I did different, which I didn't do with the testimonial video. Lighting, I had more lights in there. It looks better. It's not great. I actually did good on this part, but you want the camera on the shadow side of the person's face, which it just looks better that way. But all in all, I think with editing, everything was the same. Like, I did fine in the editing portion. I put a lot of time into it, especially this video. It took actually a couple weeks just to splice everything together, because I had to cut through a bunch of testimonials from, the tower foreman and whatnot. But yeah, there's a couple things I did improve on, but again, there's just so much more that, I've learned up to this point. So, and then I'm just going to pop on VSM's page quick, just so these are quick, but they can just show,
Sure.
Some of the graphics I've made and like little pieces of video content.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, these really are like the quickest way to learn and to get better, is to just,
for sure,
unfortunately, to like make shitty stuff like this that you look back at it and it isn't great. And I think probably even within, I'd be curious to know your mindset even while you're making it. Like, do you think it's the best thing in the world when you're making it, or did you kind of know that you were limited and so on?
And speaking of that, so let's just look at It's like, this was the first piece of content I ever made. This was a pre-recorded presentation they'd sent to me, and this was like a little test almost, and they just said, take this hour presentation and make a piece of content from it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought having that intro sequence and, the time bar down here, like, there's just, in my opinion right now, there's just too much going on in the screen.
Right.
You know what I mean? You got to read the title, you got to read that slide, and you got to read the captions, pay attention to the time bar. But then, like, tossing these graphics in there, I thought it was so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the first piece of content I ever made. I mean, I think a big thing with, like, especially Instagram is having, like, somewhat of a theme or something that's consistent across your page.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you can see with, like, these podcasts, I would start to obviously keep them the same. So, like, white background, and keep the caption the same color, the title the same color.
Yeah.
Video quality is just not great. That was just something we didn't have when we started making these. But as I was going through, like, prepping for this and just kind of looking at content, I switched up, like the colors, and the oranges don't match, the fonts really don't match. It's stuff like that when someone's scrolling through a page,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna turn them off a little bit, basically.
Right.
So, and if I just scroll up to the top here, you can see I've got a lot more of a consistent theme just from what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just scroll back down here, there's one that I wanted to show. Where's Albert Einstein? There he is. Like these, when I made this, I thought this was so cool, man. I was just like fired up. But now there's like audio, not great. I think I put his lav mic down here to stay out of the frame, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Right.
But like that text graphic that pops up with the picture of Albert Einstein, like I think that's cool, and I think that works now.
Sure.
All that stuff works now, but in terms of content and keeping stuff short, which we talked about that with TikTok. It's like I would make these even shorter, super short and sweet. Eliminate the intro that he does at the beginning, because I had him do that every time. Just say like who you are,
Yep,
and what your title is. Just eliminate that, keep it short and sweet, and then it makes for a good piece of content. But yeah, again, just everything looks like it doesn't match.
Sure.
And I think that's something that we've improved on, or at least I have, in terms of posting content for VSM.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a huge thing on social media, is to let your followers know what to expect, and whether that be from content or from visuals and stuff like that. When you think about following a page, you follow it because you like a pretty small selection of content that you see, whether it be on your Explore page or somebody shares it, and you're like, oh, I like this one post. Then you go on and you maybe see a block of 9 posts, and you're like, oh, I like all of these. But then all of a sudden, if you start getting posts that look different or have different content within them, that's when you start bleeding followers, which you don't want, obviously. So it's right. That visual component is really your first impression to let people know, like, hey, you're at the right place. You want to stay around here. This is the type of stuff you're going to get, because people don't like to be thrown for a loop like that. So, right.
The last thing I'll say too is like thumbnails. Like I think I was on the right track of, putting the title on the actual first frame, so people know what's gonna, happen basically in the video.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, finding a different, more unique way to do it, or putting a little bit more time into it, so it's not covering Jamie Smith's face.
Sure.
Or it's not Ryan with his eyes closed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's little things like that I feel like can help step your page up, basically.
100%.
All right.
Awesome. Maybe
that's all I have.
Let's do the switch over.
Yep.
So I have just I went back into my Google Photos and just kind of found some screenshots of old work. So I knew I wanted to start with I Live for Football, which was the Twitter account that I ran in high school that by the end of it had like 150,000 followers, but then got shut down because we got copyrighted too many times for videos that we reposted. And so I had like old screenshots, like I can't go back and show the page, unfortunately, but I have old screenshots of content. And I just think it's a really interesting, like those are really formidable times, and how I developed thoughts about business and social media and different stuff like that. And a lot of it's pretty evident. And then a lot of mistakes are just absolutely brutal. So like just to give you a sense for the kind of content that we'd post, it's very generic, like red meat for high school football players. Like this one's for every football player and different stuff like different videos like that. We had this really successful series called the Countdown to High School Football, which every day starting January 1, I believe, we'd put out these graphics that said X amount of days until high school football every single day until like August, whenever the first reporting day in our state was, although we had a national audience. And then you could see this one got like 300 retweets, and we do that every single day, and they get that amount of retweets every single day, which was super mind-boggling.
What do you think that is?
It's really hard to say. Obviously, there's not the same 300 people retweeting it, but we really did a good job at developing this like red meat base of high school football fans and players. I mean, that's a fanatical base, and it's also the largest base of football fans that you could find, you know, as you go up the ranks sort of in the NFL and sort of into college and stuff like that. You obviously start squeezing out people that aren't playing and squeezing out, you know, different fans and stuff like that. But the high school football fan base, obviously I don't know the number off the top of my head. It's just huge. And the amount of people who play high school football is huge. And so only having 150,000 followers, we weren't even kind of reaching the tip of that iceberg. And so this was just right on brand for us. And I think that was probably the biggest takeaway I have, is that you kind of have to know who your follower is. I've really gone forward in my own career of social media management, where like you have to understand, you have to have like an archetype in your mind of who this person is. Like I knew the exact type of person who I'm sending this content out to, which makes it a lot easier to find and to post and stuff like that. But then also I failed, and the team that we worked on this project with, like we failed to realize that has to carry over to everything you do. Like when you start promoting merchandise, when you start promoting, like you have to think about the type of person you're going to be selling it to, which is going to be the same type of person that's digesting your content. And you have to understand if they would like it or don't like it. And we just fell short of that so many times. So this was a great example of like that fitting into the type of person we were trying to go after. But a not so great example would be like, we decided our first product would be selling these like decals for people's cars for $10. And sure, they look cool, and it was like kind of a cool thing to have, but like how many middle school and high schoolers have their own car and like want to spend $10 on a decal? So it's like we just really reduced our subsect of potential people. And also it just said I Live for Football, which was like our brand, but also maybe not something that people resonated with as much. I remember when we were trying to think about like t-shirts to sell and stuff like that, we started with just our logo on a shirt. And it's like, yeah, we have 150,000 followers, but those people aren't following us because they love the brand I Live for Football, which is a stupid name in and of itself, but they're following it because they like what we represent. So we had to start thinking about, what does the brand represent? Let's make sure it's about that, not just with our logo on them. So that was an area we fell short in many times as well. I don't even think we sold any or many of these. And similarly, we tried to expand this brand of I Live for Football to like other sports, and we just didn't have a ton of success on it, just because the sort of subcultures were so different with how each sport was and what each sport cared about, and the type of content we were posting. We sort of tried to apply that model to all these other sports, and it just didn't work. And I think we just thought we could copy and paste and rinse and repeat, but when in reality, we really had to get into the weeds of like what these sports were, because we were all football players or like really big football fans, but fewer of us were basketball players or fans of basketball, or baseball players and fans of baseball. So I think we just thought that we could, at a high level, just do the same thing we were doing in other sports and in other areas, but it just didn't work. And yeah, I think that was like I said, a subsect of like us thinking that we were, because I think this is something that perforated a lot for me in like this early time in my life, where I'm like, dude, everything I try is just going to work. Like everything online that I try is just going to have a ton of success, and I can replicate the success for other companies and for other brands and stuff like that. When in reality, I mean, there was some skill that went into this, but we really just hit a good niche, and we got into Twitter and like curated content Twitter earlier than a lot of other people. And we just had a lot of momentum, and it's really easy to maintain momentum. It's really hard to get momentum started. So that's sort of the, you know, you can kind of see here, like it was like retweet if, or like if, like different polls like that would do really, really well, like 600 people retweeting stuff. And that was a pretty standard tweet for us. And then, you know, we tried to do a podcast and different stuff like that. And we started to realize, like, you know, people came because they liked the type of content we were posting. They didn't like us as people, or they didn't like the brand necessarily. They just liked the type of content. And I think we just failed to we failed to realize that super early. And that was, again, probably part of an ego thing where it's like, oh, dude, this is going to work all the time. Everything we do is going to work 100% of the time. So we really failed in that regard. But again, a really interesting project and a really like formidable time in my life where I learned how to make money online. Like this countdown tweet in the top left here, this is a football helmet brand, and we were able to sell that ad spot. So that was like a really exciting thing where we can, start doing ads and different stuff like that. So an interesting project there that again formed a lot of what I did later on. And an example of that is like one of the first freelance clients I worked with, which was kind of spurned from I Live for Football, was this company called Graphic Systems, and they did really boring, like large scale printing things. And they're like, "You're good at social media. Do you want to help us?" And I'm like, "Sure." And they're like, "You know how to like make content?" And I'm like, "I guess so." And I sort of, did like, this is a graphic I did in Canva, which is like super basic and not that impressive at all. But you can kind of, I think it's an interesting starting point for a lot of stuff that I do today. So that's kind
For
of
sure I like just talking about Canva quick. That was the first thing I used, and I still use it all the time. But it's one of those things, if you're just getting started, it's a super good tool just to at least spark some ideas. I think we've talked about that previously.
For sure.
I'll use it just to get some ideas and then bring it to Photoshop or something. But
yeah. And this was probably back in 2016, 2017. So it's really before they had a huge library of templates. So I think I was doing a lot of this stuff from scratch, which you can see because it's not very good. Then some, so we also produced a podcast for them, which was done over Skype. So it was pretty easy. So like when you see this video footage, it's just going to be like, it's just going to be webcam footage because they're recording it on Skype. But like, it's so funny looking. I wish I could go and find the actual file of like that this video was in, because I know that all of these things are just different. And this B-roll is stuff I took on my phone, which is really funny.
looks good though.
Yeah, no, it does look smooth and it looks good. I think I probably did like a stabilizer on it or something like that to make it look like really smooth. But this was all done in iMovie. This graphic like this export was from Keynote, and I guarantee you that all of these little so I think this title card was something I made in Canva and then exported it, and then I had to make sure that the backgrounds were all the same color so that it would all blend together and basically look like one graphic. So like you obviously have way more restrictions when you're working in Keynote and Canva than you do when you're in Photoshop, but these are basically just all like part and parcel, like different module aspects that I would put into Keynote and make sure it all lined up. And then I had to make sure the background was the same color. And the reason I picked this background color, which is really, really funny, was because I wanted to do this sort of waveform thing with the podcast. But this waveform is from like an iPhone. I don't remember what app it's from, but I think it's literally from when you put text to speak. So like when you click the microphone button on your iPhone, and then I would put it next to the audio, and then I would screen record it. And then I would like crop the screen recording, but the background of the screen recording was this gray. So I'm like, shoot, I have to make all my other graphics this gray color. So I would color match the background of the waveforms that happen when you're doing the text to speak. And then I would just make the rest of the graphic that color. So it all looked like cohesive. And then I have to go back and I'd have to line it all up. And like, I think I would have to line up the audio with the video in iMovie. And then I cropped it all in Keynote. Like it was such a roundabout process for a very average to subpar graphic. But I mean, we've talked about it before. Like there's not a lot of excuses when you talk about not having different tools. I mean, like I guess you're not going to be able to make the creme de la creme type of content, but like this sort of stuff is what I was making with all free tools, and it doesn't look half bad. Like you wouldn't think that I was just using
not at all
movie, and that this was literally a screen recording of the iPhone text to speak function with audio waveforms, which I really like this audio waveform design. So
yeah, super cool.
This was really
about finding a way. Jeez, that's awesome. So
I think it's all funny, and like this is when I learned like making templates is super important and different stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I kind of have like a longing for this like scrappiness of like making graphics and stuff like that. Also, I don't because it's such a roundabout way, and there's so many different hurdles and stuff that you have to work around. But looking back on it, it's kind of like the good old days that you think about when you kind of first get into everything. So I guess closing out, I just have a couple graphics here that were from the first podcast I did, How They're Here. And they're fine. They're good. I don't think I like the text that I used here at all. It's a little weird and rounded, and it's fine, but not great. And these are, I think I was getting a little bit more into Canva templates, but still a lot of this stuff was being made from scratch. Like I know this logo I did make from a Canva template. So just like fun old stuff to look at. Like I love looking at, trying to pause this as you can before it. So like, this is obviously, I use like an online background cutter.
Background remover, yeah.
Background remover to get this. And then I had to like figure out how to make this thumbnail and kind of make it look good. And all of this stuff was again done in Keynote. So like this sliding bar was just a rectangle that I just had like transition from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. It was such a process to export the video because this was shot on my iPhone. So I'd like cut it up in iMovie and then export it and then upload it to the program Headliner to do the thumbnails, or not the thumbnails, the captions. And then I put it back in a Keynote and then like re-export it. So by the time it was done, it was already an iPhone video, and then it just got more grainy because I was exporting it 4 different times. But again, like I'm using a USB microphone into GarageBand in my laptop, and that's still what I use when I do that kind of stuff today. So it's just like, I like to look back on this stuff because it was like the scrappy time where like, you know, I was doing it and I'm figuring it out as I go. And I think it's kind of really a fond memory of mine to see like, you know, I've learned both in the tools that I use, but then also the content has gotten a little bit better, but kind of a nostalgic look back for me.
For sure. And you think about too, like even with you just doing the How They're Here podcast, like, you know, you scrapped your way through it, but like all the, you know, connections you made, all the people you met, like that's huge. Like
100%.
I'm not going to speak for you, but that's probably set up, you know, business for you in the future that you wouldn't have had if you didn't do the podcast. So
yeah, it really has. And like, even in this, like looking at this kind of stuff, and I'm sure you can kind of trace it for yourself too. Like when people ask me about myself and like in job interviews and stuff, I usually start with this I live for football thing. Just because, like I said, it was a really formidable time in my life and like figuring out what I wanted to do. And then you can really trace it directly from here, which led me to one freelance opportunity, which led me to another freelance opportunity, which led me to, you know, wanting to do a podcast. And that podcast has spurned it's like another branch where there's so many different offshoots of like meeting the Back Pocket guys and meeting you and like all this sort of stuff that really started back. It's really fun to like look at, like started back from like a really traceable single instance that of saying yes to, and then like growing from there has been really, really crazy, which maybe is the entire theme of this whole thing, which is like, you know, saying yes and trying new things is really important because you kind of end up in spots that you didn't think you were going to end up in the past, and you're a better person for it and you're a more talented professional for it, and all this sort of stuff. But I like I said, I get really nostalgic looking back on it because I really think it's formed me and put me in the position I am today.
For sure. Couldn't have said it any better. I 100% agree. And I think, you know, on my side, it basically started out for me as I had a GoPro and then I would edit videos on that.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point in my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked to create stuff. And then, you know, looking back, I just, like we said, we scrapped our way through it. Now we're here.
Yeah.
Now they're here.
How they're here, how they got here, right here. I should interview myself. No, I think it's I think it's great, and I think it's funny too because looking back at this stuff, I know in the moment I was getting frustrated at all like the roadblocks and like different variants of stress that I induced upon myself for things that I A, reflect fondly upon right now, and then B, probably didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So I think that again is a good reminder, because I'll get frustrated at myself and frustrated at different things, even today, even this week. And I got to kind of remind myself that it's a part of a bigger picture, and it's not going to matter in the long run. And, you know, it's just a part of the growing process, and it's a part of those growing pains that we all go through. And hopefully we can get to a point where like you and I are sitting right here and looking back at our old stuff and being like, man, I actually reflect pretty fondly on that sort of stuff.
Well, dang, man. I didn't even know what else to say. I mean, you just killed it right there.
No, I think
we should end on that.
I think we should too. And again, right at the 30-minute mark, like we do this for a living. So
That's crazy. We do it every time.
We do.
I think we went a little longer last week, but
yeah,
that's okay.
we had a guest. We had a third person. So
yeah,
awesome. Well, I encourage everybody. This is a little off topic of what we talked about here, but go to our LinkedIn page and check out, or first of all, give us a follow, and you'll get. That's where we'll start putting sort of the notifications of going live and different pieces of content there. Jordan cut up a really fantastic video encapsulating the last 2 weeks of our TikTok journey. A really well-made video, and I'm really glad we did it the way we did. I think it was a really fun project for me.
It was cool.
And Jordan did really well on the edit, and it's gotten a lot of really great. Yeah, no, it was awesome. And it's gotten a lot of great feedback. I think I like it more because I knew the process and I recorded the video and I just sent it over to you and didn't know what to get in return. And what I got in return was awesome. And it was like, watching almost like a mini movie about myself, which from a narcissistic point of view is really, really fun. But I think there's a lot of good value in there. And Jordan did a really great job breaking it down. So make sure to go watch that if you haven't already. I don't know, listen wherever you want to listen. The more we do this kind of stuff, the more we gotta realize that we gotta tell people, like, go watch us on YouTube and have us on the background and put it on 1.5, 2 times speed so you can see the stuff we're talking about. Like, this is a really visual heavy episode again, so it probably will be helpful for you to watch it. But if you want to listen, we're everywhere you listen to podcasts. I don't have anything else to say.
Boom, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.